So I thought I would bring over an analogy from the writer world, which I think is useful if you just kind of detach it from the very writer specific parts. But when you're like writing a pitch or you're trying to get an agent or an editor's attention, they say you need to like in your letter or in your statement, like talk about the hook, the book, and the cook. So, and you can do it in different orders and be playful about it. But so the hook being like, what is that unique thing about your work that that wouldn't describe anything else and could only come from you? So, obviously the hook to bring them in. The book, like kind of I think the larger context for what the work is and how it might be speaking to other things in like the world of painting or who are your influences, that kind of thing. And then the cook being yourself, like who's the person who cooked all this magic up? And then how do you describe yourself? A lot of times there's like biographical, there's shows and collections and such if you've gotten to that point in your career. But so I want to start by looking at an artist statement from an artist in our community. I think it's really beautifully written, and I thought it could be a good way to kind of open up and inspire us. And then I think we'll use that and kind of lead into breaking down these three parts and taking some time to write and hopefully sharing a little bit. So I wanted to share Tammy Rubin's artist statement. I almost pulled up Caroline's, but I thought that might have been like a little too insular. So Caroline's an amazing artist in our community. Tammy Rubin is another amazing artist in our community. She has an exhibition. She's part of an exhibition right now at Grey Duck, which it opened a couple weeks ago. I didn't make it to that. I actually have an appointment to go tomorrow, but I love her work. I'm a big fan. I think it's magical and unique and dark and troubling, and it's really brilliant work. So if you haven't seen it, go see it at Grey Duck, and let's just kind of whet our palettes with how she describes her work. Bear with me, I'll just read through it. My ceramic sculptures investigate the tensions between the ready-made and the handcrafted object. Sculptures are intensely colored, technically complex, and ornamented cloned assemblages of everyday objects consisting of porcelain, underglaze, glaze, plasti dip, resin, and wood. I collect mass-produced consumer objects that strike me as iconic of the everyday, such as household tools and fixtures, plastic product and food packaging, toys, ceramic figurines, and food molds. In these industrially produced objects, many of which are cheap, trivial, and disposable, I find unexpected beauties and meanings. Using intricate motifs, I examine widely diverse themes relating to consumer culture, such as magical thinking, animism, ritual, domestic, and liturgical objects, artificial nature, and sensory desire. Relying on informed intuition and process, I transform the familiar and trivial into the mythic and fantastical. A born and bred urbanite, I have always separated from the external natural world, instead fascinated by the man-made objects that shape the urban environment. Attending church first evoked my awareness of the personal symbolic meanings invested in objects and how they can provide emotional substance, uncomfortable desires, and physical comfort. My studio practice begins with mining my collections. I examine the form and function of collected objects, reimagining how they might be used, or contemplating how their forms separated from their function suggest new objects, converting them into a minimal shell. Molds are filled with porcelain slip, a myriad of replicas are cast, and then through a process of dismantling, reconstruction, and assembling, I create chimerical forms. As I examine the spaces between the handmade and ready-made object, handedness becomes an essential element in the work. Sculptures are meticulously layered in extruded clay, creating surfaces of bulbous dots, spikes, drips, piping, beads, and sized and, I never know how to pronounce this, sgraffito, lines, inlay, stiples, and pits. The tactile surfaces are used to both accentuate and obscure, encouraging an intimate experience where I pull the viewer to immerse in sumptuous exteriors and sensual possibilities. This triggers an instinctive desire to touch, to stroke, and a sense of dissatisfaction once that action is denied. Children often feel compelled to touch objects, to make meaning out of experiences. I believe the desire for sensory experiences and feelings of dissatisfaction mirrors a longing often felt in a consumer society. By transforming mass-produced objects into porcelain, the replicas become more precious, more fragile, and more absurd than the original. Separating objects from their original function, I contemplate ideas of authenticity and inherited symbolism in a form. By bringing the everyday into art and art into the everyday, sculptures open up a dreamlike space of unexpected associations and dislocations. So if I can, assuming I can still see the chat, I might have to stop screen sharing. I would love to hear some reactions to that piece, like what grabbed you, what jumped out at you. I'll say the shift from the first to second paragraph, and this is such a writerly thing to respond with, but like moving into the first person, like when she starts situating herself as the maker, but it's more removed. I think that I've seen that in a number of artist statements, and I think it's a really, it can be a very effective trick, not a trick necessarily, but like a persuasive move. I'm going to turn on my light while I see if anybody populates the chat. I love the story-like descriptions.
So we have.
Hi there.
There we go.
Oh,
okay, good.
There you go. I'm right here.
I was going to introduce you, Carol. There you are.
Hi there. What really got me about that was the descriptions of the tactileness of the people wanting to touch it and to handle it and how they're restricted from doing that. That really rang a bell with me. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it is very evocative, and maybe that's part of my personal draws. I just found the writing to just be like so clear and descriptive, and also just very practical. The way she describes like materials that she uses, but those are very useful things. I think your audience, whether it's, you know, a friend or a collector or a curator, they probably will have those questions. So to find a way to like embed your conversations about materials and process, I think, into your statement is really useful. Some other things that some other statements that have come in. Coca says, is it standard to have a long statement like that? I usually see shorter. I've seen a range. Caroline, you might be more like a better student of this. What's your experience?
I find that it's wise to have a 1-paragraph statement and then like a 3-paragraph statement, because there are just going to be times where one is more appropriate than the other, or where you're asked very specifically, it needs to be this long. And it's nice to have that already adapted from your statement, so that when you need to just get it to somebody quickly, you've got that. But when you have the leeway and the freedom to really, like on your website, for instance, you have all the room you want. Obviously, if you went on too long, no one's going to read it. But, you know, I think it's nice to have spaces too, where you do have time and space to really talk about all those different elements that Tammy got to. And I would also say I really liked the part where she said she began her studio practice with looking at her collection of objects. I thought, as you were saying, in terms of just really kind of the nuts and bolts of something that is much more complex than that, that's a nice way to bring people in, to say, okay, well, the first thing that I do to get started is this.
Thanks for sharing that. That's great. That's helpful. Some other comments. I liked her statement about creating tension. And another panelist said, going back to past history in her lifetime to reconnect to her work is what stood out. So that I think is part of that, like giving context, like where do you fit into the larger conversation? So I think if we can pause there and do like a 5-minute exercise where everybody thinks about like, what is that unique, magical thing about your work? Like, what is the hook? So write a few sentences. Nobody has to share anything, but it would be awesome to hear a few of these things at the end. I'll bring us back in 5. Okay, so it's been 5 minutes. I'm hoping that we can have at least one brave soul volunteer to join our group on screen and share somewhat of what you wrote, or just talk about the process, any kind of questions that came up. Carol, did you want to share something? I think you're still on the Zoom with us. Great.
I am. I'm right here. All right. So I've always had a problem with the artist statement, talking about the hook right there. I work in encaustics, and I've always felt like the hook was the actual texture of the whole thing, but it's sounding more like it's the meaning behind the paintings. Did I get that right?
I guess the way I phrased it is just, I mean, meaning can be kind of embedded into a lot of different description, but what is sort of the essential and unique characteristic or characteristics of the work?
So are we talking about, sorry, very barky dog. Are we talking about, like right now I'm working on political statement. Hang on, let me brighten up this.
Can we bring Jamal on as well?
All right, I fixed that. So I'm working on a set of paintings that have a lot of texture in oval shapes, working on possibly ovaries. I'm mad about the abortion situation here in Texas, and this is the series I'm working on now. So am I incorporating that into the artist statement, or is it more general than that?
Mm. I mean, I guess it's the context in which are you promoting this book, this body of work, or what is, like Caroline was suggesting, I think you have to be infinitely adaptable. And you're never going to have, I think it's very rare to have a one size fits all statement. I think you're all ideally always being responsive to the context, whether you're applying for a grant, or putting a statement up on like the main wall of your exhibition to share with your audiences what the work is about. I think that you just have to really try to engage the specific context.
Okay.
Jamal, did you want to share some of what you had written in this? I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, hey, hello?
Yes.
Oh, am I coming through fine?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So in full disclosure, I am very new into my transition as a new media artist, and I'm actually in the process of writing an artist statement, so I don't have anything official written down, but I did have like a mission statement that I was hoping to share.
A mission statement for,
It's just kind of like my mission statement as far as just the essence of it, or yeah, just the essence of the work that I do.
sure. Can I tell you what we respond to?
I'm sorry.
I mean, can sort of tell you what we're responding to, what we're picking up from it.
Okay. Yeah, so it's to create immersive installations using innovative technology to awake the spirit toward global environmental consciousness. And it's just it's pretty loaded in some ways, and it's a pretty North Star goal, but yeah.
Sure, go for it. Yeah, no.
That was like the one line that I have to start
Okay.
things off. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you do it one more time?
Yeah, it's to creating immersive installations using innovative technology to awake the spirit toward global environmental consciousness. And just to give some context, I try to create. I'm in the process of like creating installs that connect back to the climate problem, and they connect back to earth or nature in some sort of way. And I always try to include like the hook, as you say, is for me is always just incorporating earth in some sort of way, and bringing attention to, you know, like a problem that we as a people are facing.
I think that's great. I mean, I think it is a good hook. I would have questions, I think, about what are those innovative technologies, like things I would hope that you would expand on further in the statement, like what are the innovative technologies? And then just kind of going in a little bit deeper, but I think it's a compelling statement in terms of like what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it, which you pack a lot into one sentence.
Okay, so what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and what was that last one?
What did I say? It's what I really thought I heard in that sentence is that it's like what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why.
Why? Okay. All right. That kind of gives me some good structure on like like knowing how to now expand on these three areas. So that's definitely helpful. And I had one question, if I could ask that, please. So one of the things that I'm facing right now is as an artist, if I get the opportunity to create work that's not particularly directly connected back to my ethos or my artist statement, how is something like that handled, right? Because now I'm creating work that just doesn't align. It doesn't particularly align 100% with the mission statement. And how do you handle stuff like that?
I mean, I think you can make kind of sweeping statements about like my work has in general done this and accomplished it these ways. In my most recent work, I'm making a departure. And like that's like that kind of narrative like storytelling about like why you're going in a different direction. What are you exploring there? But if like that other piece is like the crux of what you do and like that describes your work like to date, your body of work, then I think it's important to include that, even if it doesn't like neatly fit over whatever you're working on now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Alia.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
I wanted to say something about the hook idea. When I started doing, I was doing the free write along with everyone, and what came to mind was just an image, like just imagining somebody walking up to my work for the first time. And it's easier for me because I'm a painter, so you can kind of see that. But even if you're doing something that's time-based or whatever, just when somebody's interacting with my work for the first time, what is it that they're going to see? What is it that's going to hit them about the work? For me, some of the words were like color, vibrance, emotion, like that I wrote like emotion walks in first. Like it's not, I think what makes my work specific is not that you need a backstory or that there's like a lot of narrative baked in, because there are paintings where you see it and you're like, ooh, I really need to go look at that for a long time and really get into. And I feel like my paintings are more like, you get it, like it just happens to you. And so that's kind of what I was writing about, was that experience. And I also wanted to acknowledge that in the questions we have, Laura was asking if we have several bodies of work, we need a statement for each, which I think you kind of answered with Carol. But what I would say just from my perspective is that, I mean, there are always new bodies of work and they each have their own reason and their own kind of idiosyncrasies. But with an artist statement, there's an element or a level at which you're kind of getting really high above your work and looking at it all. and trying to, it's what makes it so hard, but trying to really say like, okay, I did all this, I continue to do this. This is the artist that I am because I'm making all of this work. And and then you can say later, sometimes in my third paragraph, if this is for an application for something, I'll say the latest body of work you see, to Carol's example, these ovals and ovaries or whatever, you can kind of go into like something that feels like the most pressing or the newest body of work or the body of work that you're applying with or whatever. But the artist statement also needs to be able to kind of represent you from a farther back perspective than just, this is the work that I made most recently.
I think that's very helpful. And I would kind of the way that Jamal talked about it is like a North Star with the statement he shared. I would guess for most artists, there are like certain concerns and questions broadly, investigations that underlie a lot of their work, if not all of their work. And I think kind of putting words to that is an important skill. And it's something that, again, like as your career develops more and more, like you always kind of want to have a map of like, how has your practice evolved and like, where does it come from? Are you, and it's sort of using that North Star analogy again, just like pivoting and understanding, like, is that still what I'm working towards, or has the work changed in a fundamental way? So I think there are ways to be broad and specific at the same time, which in maybe we'll give it a few minutes just to see, or a few seconds, if anybody else wants to join. And if nobody does, then I think we should spend a few more minutes writing and really thinking about that, like the specific and like the broad, and like how do you bring them all into like, and let's because to the point about like variability, and you're not just going to have one statement. I think we should all endeavor to write like a solid paragraph that like includes all that stuff that we're talking about. And I mean, I think you can leave off some of the like long form stuff that you might have like on your website, like Carolyn was referencing her website in terms of like, where you went to school and where you've shown your work and what collections you might be in, that wouldn't be like in the kind of the heart of it. So I think we should try to get that like heart piece down, or at least get some words on paper that could help us out in the future. Does anybody else want to come off for this session, or do you want to save it for when you write this amazing paragraph in the next few minutes?
I actually have a question, and I hesitate if I should wait to ask it, but I'm going to go ahead because it's a burning question. It's kind of to what Jamal was saying, where he was sharing more of like a mission statement, or in some ways kind of a manifesto. I don't know. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, Jamal, but I have found whenever I try to write about why I make work, I get derailed, because it just becomes like, it's too big. It's like, and then I end up writing a manifesto, and the manifesto is like, it's a nice idea, but it's inherently an idea. It's an ideal structure. Whereas an artist statement, I think, needs to be more on the ground with your work, in terms of like giving people your materials and your process and what it is. And obviously there, but it's got to be somewhere in the middle, because an artist statement isn't just like, I paint in acrylic and I use these colors, I mean, it's something in the middle. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it has to, the specificity, I think it's like what you kind of learn in all writing practice and really all art practice. It's like, you have to kind of like give it that specificity and that authenticity, which I think comes a lot through detail. If we keep the kind of like expansive metaphor going, but it is really in the details, and like, that's how you kind of really ground yourself. And I think in a statement, specifically an artist statement, it's the more you can kind of get people trying to picture your work, because you're trying to translate a visual medium. So if you really think about it as like, I need to get those visual details in there, and how do I convey them? One thing I didn't mention, but in Tammy Rubin's statement, I loved also the shift where it's like, you're going to want to touch it and you're not allowed to touch it. So it's like even embodying the viewer's experience, like a physical experience of navigating. I thought that was, it just really put me in the mind of like her work without even, you know, having images. I mean, it's hard not to see the work when I know the work, but I think I'm pretty sure that if you didn't know the work, you could get some pretty like keen images from those descriptions, or at least have sort of like a physical sense of what it would be like to interact with them. So yeah, I think that's, thanks for sharing that. I think that's really generous, Caroline, to, because it's challenging, right? To like figure out how, and then how to be really economical, because people are busy. And I mean, I think sometimes you do have time and space for a more expansive statement, but sometimes you just have to get to the point. And like, what is the point of the work? Who are you? You know, why are you uniquely poised to be doing this? I mean, not in a defensive way, but like really just kind of positioning yourself in the work. So yeah, that's, I think it's hard to do, but I think that when it's something that it's just, you're going to keep working on it and keep refining it, and it gets stronger and evolves with the work.
Definitely does. Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Hey, I had a question, just in terms of like, just kind of how, you know, we're talking about artist statements and how you kind of, it's almost as introducing yourself and your work and the content of your work. And it got me thinking of kind of websites too, where, you know, there's, it's like, what template do you choose? Since there's so many different ones, like say there's website, you know, if like 3 examples of your artist website, I've seen some where it's an experience, you're having to go to different places to find like the hamburger to get you to images or to a statement or to some place that, you know, is just like a photo dump of what they're interested in. And then some websites, it's a catalog of all the work that they've done in the past, like all of their paintings or all of their work. And then there's other websites where it's just current work for sale. And so it's like you have like 3 different ways to kind of present yourself as an artist online. And I love what everyone's been doing, like kind of the input, just all the different places where we're coming from. And, you know, like I always used to kind of think the artist statement, like you were talking about the hook, that it should be just, you know, the artist, the medium, and the content. You know, when does the artist statement you know, is it supposed to just be a small support for the work rather than like an explanation or like in some bad instances, like an excuse of why you're making this work? So is it like, how do you, I guess, kind of going back, you know, when we were writing our paragraphs, I kind of was like, empty. You know, like, do you, not to be so technical, but do you choose a template just to kind of like go from there, and then you do different examples of what you like? Or, I mean, what would you suggest to kind of start when you kind of don't, you know what your work is, you know what you want to express, but then how would you express it without boring either the curator or, you know, if sometimes I've seen some statements where it's super poetic, and then I start to scan just to get to, you know, what's the medium, what's, you know, who is this person? I don't know, it's kind of a big question, but what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question, I think. And if you don't mind, I'll just jump in and give some thoughts. I guess, first of all, I think having that core language is like such an important part of it. And like in terms of like, do you just kind of change it every time? I do think there are probably certain things, again, that are essential and core to the work. So I think honing in on that is important. In terms of like, what work should the artist statement be doing? I really think it should be inviting people into the work. I don't think it should, I mean, there are definitely uses for like a didactic panel, you know, usually like in an exhibition or a catalog or something, but I think that's not usually what the artist is doing. That's usually somebody who's interpreting the work. So I think the artist has to insert a little bit of themselves into it. Whether it's, I mean, some people do that through poetic language, or description. Some people, it's by talking about like what is compelling them to make the work. I think just kind of somehow getting like that ineffable part on paper is part of the challenge. But yeah, I think it has to be somewhere in between, like a description of like what the work is in terms of materials and medium and all this stuff. And like something that's esoteric. And I think it has to have some of that poetry. I think in most instances, I would imagine a lot of people who are coming to this workshop are trying to bring people into the work, right? That's my guess. So it's just, I think it should be a really inviting, and that's like why I think we're talking about like the hook. It's just, you know, what's going to grab people and make them want to see the work and spend time with it.
We have Danielle with her hand raised, and then also a question from Phyllis in the chat. Did you see that, Dalia, or you want me to say it?
Yeah, I do see it.
Yes, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes, hi, this is Danielle. Sorry, I joined late. I'm very glad that you mentioned the point about, having the artist statement kind of, describing the work. But I really want to, have your point of view about to which extent, because I've always had that challenge. And my challenge is mostly to the fact that sometimes, well, there's a correlation between the work I'm doing, the story behind, and how I present myself. But I think something could be missing. Why? Because for example, I can say, well, I'm doing I'm in a textile wall, whatever I'm doing is just around textile and acrylic. However, whenever I sit down and I have to create a piece of artwork, the story which I get inspired from to make the artwork is the story I actually put behind the artwork. However, when you look at the artwork itself, it doesn't like it's not a representation of the story. For example, I can have a story about a girl being because I do a lot of things to support women victims of violence. So I can get inspired by a story of a girl maybe who has been through some trauma, and but then the artwork I'm going to come up with at the end of my work is going to be let's say something, let's say like a basket, something like that. So when you look at the basket, you're going to think, oh, well, she's just, she just created a piece of artwork representing a basket, something like that. However, when you read the story behind the basket, it has really nothing to, the basket is not like a woman who has like blood on her body, or maybe who looks, I don't know, stressed, something like that. So I've always had that challenge about, definitely in my artist statement, I'm trying to, talk about what I'm doing, the different techniques I'm using. But when it comes to bringing the audience understanding that my representation is not exactly the representation of the story, of why I do the work. Why I do the work gets me going, but it's not exactly what is you're gonna see on the board. I really wanted to have, to get to know what you think about such cases.
I guess I would immediately say there's a way to talk about what the story is and what it means to you without telling the story, because it sounds like that is sort of a distraction from what you were trying to accomplish, and the work isn't a direct representation of it. So I think if you can capture what is the essence of that story, why is it inspiring to you, why is it driving your work, that's, I think, the part. And like, I think the fact of the story and just knowing, what is its cultural context and what it's meaning to you personally, those are all interesting details that I think there are examples of that kind of specificity that we want to strive for, in terms of like, it's hooking it to a very specific thing that is a source of inspiration. So I think there's ways, but economy is what this is all about in a lot of ways. So how do you, and you can't spend your whole artist statement talking about this, it sounds like it's just one element of it and it's a point of inspiration, but I think it's important to bring it in and just think about the meaning to you and to the work.
All right, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
And before we take 5 minutes to write again, Phyllis had asked a question about, how, when you're still kind of searching for that meaning in your work, what do you write about essentially? And I think you could use this exercise broadly, the exercise of writing about your work, as an opportunity to explore what your creative questions are, like what your creative curiosities are, and use that to kind of launch into you might find something through the process of writing that helps move the work in a certain direction, but I think just kind of thinking about them as like developing on parallel tracks and informing each other could be helpful in your case.
Yes, I think so. I think that's gonna help, and that's actually what I was thinking of. What I was thinking of starting doing, and maybe going from there, I can ask the right questions and get maybe the right answers to help me to have something pretty good. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
Okay, let's take 5 minutes to try to write that wonderful paragraph that's going to summarize our work and make everybody want to see it. Okay. I hope that was productive. Does anybody want to join us in this virtual room and discuss what they came up with or any questions that have arisen? All right, we'll give it another minute.
I'll ask a question while we're waiting to see if anyone else has something they want to share. But I always find it really difficult when I'm trying to describe my work. And obviously you want to bring people in. So to some degree, you're kind of selling it to them, you know, in your language. But I don't want to oversell it. You know, I don't want to, it's hard to know how to say complimentary things about my work without, you know, obviously ideally you want somebody else to do that for you. And so I'm always kind of stumbling in that spot of like, how do I talk about this in a way that sounds exciting and tantalizing, but without aggrandizing?
I think that's a good question. I think one trick to maybe try is avoid the use of adjectives, just as a way, like letting the work, it's not obviously speaking for itself, but, you know, don't say obviously like my brilliant paintings, even though they are, but like, you know, just being more straightforward and just kind of almost journalistic, you know, and so stripping out that kind of aggrandizing language, I think would help a lot. And I think that's the stuff that is most uncomfortable for us to write about ourselves, for most of us. And yeah, can also just come across as arrogant, like you're saying, like all those things. So I think if there's a way to talk about it without trying to attribute like value through language, I think that's one suggestion.
Yeah.
Jamal, did you want to join us again and share what you've come up with? Maybe you've embellished your sentence into a whole paragraph.
Hey. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so actually, I kind of went through my website and other like notes that I had written down and kind of copied and pasted like multiple sentences here and there. So I didn't particularly write something fresh right now based off of that first sentence, but I kind of scrapped together pieces like sentences and paragraphs here and there that I had. And if that's okay, I could read that out and maybe that is an artist statement. I don't know.
Sure, go ahead.
And it is, I did want to mention that I did like the word count on it. It comes out to like 300 words. I hope that's okay also.
Sure, let's see. So it's probably like a page. Go ahead. Let's see how it reads.
Okay, cool. And forgive me if I stumble or I kind of break because probably the first time I'm kind of reading this out. So yeah, here it goes. The love for technology started at an early age, from building computers or upgrading them with the latest lighting systems to using trial AOL CDs to surf chat rooms and seeing the interaction from people all around the globe. This quickly turned into a love for digital web design, web development, and media creation. I witnessed the rise of internet technology and how it connected us globally, for better or for worse. My aha moments came when traveling to the rainforests of South America. I began to wonder if our future generations would be able to see the same beautiful earth I saw? Or would our daily unconscious actions cause more irreversible damage, putting our youth in a place to deal with the consequences? I've recently embarked into the next phase of my journey to rediscover my purpose. I'm obsessed with understanding why our way of life is destroying our home planet. My awe of Earth is the light that guides my creative ideas. Currently, I'm studying and experimenting with the realm of immersive art, with the key goal to raise awareness and spark action for the environmental crisis we as humanity are facing.
I think that read well. I wrote down I witnessed the rise because I felt like it really started there. I think there were 2 or 3 sentences before that that were more kind of, they're interesting, but I think it's more like personal background and not necessarily even like artistic education background. So I think maybe condensing and maybe even eliminating some of that stuff and just letting the important details rise to the top. Yeah, I think you do have the bones of an artist statement, and I think you should just keep working on it. Thanks for
Great.
sharing
Okay.
it. And then yeah, sharing something for the first time isn't easy. So that's awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you for receiving it. I appreciate your advice.
Well, I think we might call it a night. I really appreciate everybody listening, this sort of unusual format, and I appreciate my conversation partner Caroline very much. It's been fun, and I hope we get to do this in person together someday, and even better, like come see your work in shows and see your own words kind of on the walls and also in your artist statements in those contexts. So good luck. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Dalia. I thought this was really helpful. I'm sure everybody has gotten a lot of new ideas to work with and craft. So thank you very much for your time and expertise.
Have a good
And
night.
yeah, this has been recorded, so it will be shared on the Big Medium website. So if you missed any at the beginning, or if you want to recommend this to any of your friends,